Hello everyone. In this edition of Infinite Questions, we are going to look at a few apocalyptic scenarios to determine if prepping is a complete lie. So if you're ready, let's watch the show. So let's ask some questions, and we can start with 3 apocalyptic scenarios. I put forth these questions because there are a lot of prepper channels, and channels that describe ways to survive an apocalyptic event. The first event would be a centralized event like a town or city. That would be described as a temporary apocalyptic event. Now, I by no means am I trying to discredit the prepping community. I believe it's always a good idea to be aware of the fact that the power grid could go down temporarily or some event may happen that you may want to stock up on a few things for convenience sake. Remember the toilet paper scare of 2020 when people were hoarding the bum tissue? So let's ask the question, what would happen to you in a temporary event where central resources had become unavailable, like the power grid, water, and essential services? The first one that comes to mind in our recent history is the pandemic, which eventually touched the entire planet. The mandates were restricted store hours, homeschooling, in some cases curfews, and in some cities food and water shortages, but these were quickly remedied. Important surgeries were postponed, and in many cases people that could worked at home. Social distancing and general hygiene plans had been mandated. Do you remember the hand sanitizers everywhere and vax certificates that allowed you to dine or enter a business establishment? Some examples are doctors, dentists, restaurants. Do you remember your government ID was directly tied to those documents? And a political war was established between the vaxxed and unvaxxed? I'm glad those days are sort of behind us and some form of normality is slowly returning. Now, from a social point of view, this event caused the highest crime rates in recent history, as well as high cases of anxiety and severe mental trauma to many people, including, dare I say, the S word. These problems occurred at a human level because of personal isolation, not being able to interact with family and friends because all social gatherings were either terminated or limited in capacity. In other words, people had a hard time coping with the loss of minor privileges, and a mindset of fear had crippled society as we know it. So I'm not sure if this scenario qualifies as an apocalyptic event, but it sure changed the face of society as we knew it. Prepping, although is always a good idea, had a small influence on this event as government and conveniences were still intact. However, the mindset of the planet's population had been changed due to the change in societal norms and minor inconveniences. And we all know how this affected us and each person individually. Now, I don't mean to diminish the severity of that event because frankly it was horrible. There is not a single person that doesn't have a sad or traumatic story during that time. But for lack of a better word, let's call that a minor apocalyptic event. So it's obvious that we did not need some hardcore prepping skills to overcome that event, would you agree? Now we can move on to apocalyptic event 2, which would be a medium scenario. This could happen as a result of war or a breakdown in government services or natural disaster, or all of the above. Government services are suspended, emergency assistance is slow, everyone is rushing to local stores to stock up as best they can, the power grid is temporarily down. This is where a mild form of prepping would come in handy. A few weeks of water and food in the pantry are always a good idea. A full tank of gas and some safety items such as flashlights, medical items. It's also a good idea to always get your medications for a 90-day period if you can. This scenario is a waiting game, to wait until the government services are reinstated and flowing and emergency help can arrive. So limited prepping would be required at this point. Stay home and sit tight would probably be the government's recommendation. This would be a situation where hopefully recovery is possible and quickly remedied. We would see communities coming together to help their neighbors and relief services aiding the population. So in this scenario, a centrally located apocalypse would require a bit of prepping. Would you agree? Now here is where things get weirdly interesting, and as sad as this may be, this is where prepping fails. There will be some sad reminders of how modern society actually works, and of course this is just my opinion. So we have arrived at the end game. Yes, a true apocalyptic event, whether it be from an asteroid, climate change, natural event or nuclear world war. There is no government relief, because it is fragmented, there is no law or authority to govern the public, services are non-existent. And no one is coming to help. You are completely on your own. With the exception of a small percentage of people, we have become a society of sedentary people. Obesity is at an all-time high. Mental illness that is kept in check with drugs and health issues that are also maintained affect a huge amount of regular people, from diabetics to lung disease, heart meds, allergies, breathing problems and so on. And basic skills like gardening or hunting are completely alien to most inner city dwellers, and they make up most of the population. I would have to say that anyone living in an inner city environment is basically toast, even if they had stocked supplies. It just wouldn't be enough for any long-term survival outside of maybe 3 months. The congestion of people on any survivors combined with the amount of renegade crime that would ensue would make their lifespan extremely short no matter what prepping they had. In that scenario, I believe any supplies they had would be taken from them by anyone who had a weapon. So their prepping would only last a temporary amount of time. I won't even get into the lack of medical drugs they would need to sustain any amount of mental acuity. Or the burden of loved ones that would eventually prevent them from leaving the city. An example would be an ill parent or child or loved one. So for them, sadly, the prepping scenario is a failure. So let's just call inner cities a wash. Yes, there may be a few survivors, but given enough time, the cities are not the place you want to be even if you are a prepper. Okay, suppose from some kind of miracle we could escape the city along with millions of other cars jamming up the highways, but let's just suppose we did, and we are on our way to stay with our country relatives who are preppers. They have the land and the means to do the whole prepping idea, from canning and dry storage food and potable water. They have solar panels and all the trimmings. However, these things must still be available: a non-contaminated water source, non-contaminated soil, and a climate that is suitable for crops and human existence. Basically, it needs to be a small paradise, but in a nuclear situation, radiation would permeate everything. A climate catastrophe would also be a problem for crops and animals. Also, I have found that most self-sustaining homes, like a farm, are easy prey to any roaming gang of desperate people. Again, any prepping goods like stored food, dried food, would be a temporary survival tactic, eventually ending in starvation and eventually death. I'm not even taking into consideration the medical problems that would arise, as well as the mental stability of a person or family enduring such conditions. We are still on the extinction level event, and we have covered 2 scenarios, the city and then the country survivalists. Now let's travel to our wealthy friends' underground bunker and look at the viability of survival with them. The family bunker is small but comfortable and essentially made for 2 to 6 people depending on the size. The cost can be anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000, complete with freeze-dried food bags, a water and air filtering system, and a small medical bay for ordinary injuries, some medications, and solar, also a generator for electricity. Looks very comfortable. However, these bunkers never take into account the social and mental environment close quarters may invoke, like feelings of depression, anger, even psychotic behavior due to being in such close quarters over a long period of time. This topic of mental illness during isolation has been researched ad nauseum. Again, as much prepping that has been done here, it's still a temporary solution to a very long-term problem. And the result will still end in the loss of life. Because you can never predict the amount of time you will be isolated, so it's a coin toss. Well, that didn't work out well at all. So let's take some time to move up the ladder to the mega wealthy, and see what they have going on at the end of life as we know it, shall we? So we are at the entrance to their bunker, and it is glorious. They have a swimming pool, a wine storage room, independent living quarters, and even family personal housing. The ultra-wealthy have spared no expense when it comes to entertainment. Also equipped with an air filtration system that will last decades if need be, as well as a purification water supply. Only the best food and medical equipment are on hand as well. Doctors and surgeons are also in residency in exchange for a bunk at the lavish shelter. Weapons and transportation are part of the inventory as well when needed. They even have a small military in exchange for a bunk at the shelter. Sadly, I am denied entry as I and so many others hold no value to the wealthy. It's hard to believe that the selfish, entitled elite will be the ones that restore humanity. So our last stop is the government-funded bunkers that are hidden and scattered around the country. If we are lucky to find one, because long-term prepping didn't work. Well, we don't even make it past the gate to the bunker. The military is there and the bunker is already at capacity. Unknown to regular people, the government held a lottery for residency at the bunkers, and since we are not a doctor, a politician, a mechanic, or are of value to the bunker, we all have been declined entry. The government bunkers are strictly bare bones. They are more likely meant for pure survival rather than any extra amenities. They can hold a population of millions at a sustainable length of time. But sadly, what the inhabitants' destiny will be, well, we just don't know. In light of everything I have said, it is my opinion that prepping, although it is a good idea in the short term, it doesn't really work in any long-term non-sustainable environment. You see, you need these factors to make prepping a viable option: clean breathable air, clean farmable land, healthy livestock, and vegetation, and a clean drinkable water source. The lack of any one of those factors and the entire long-term prepping fails. I know there are hundreds of channels selling their food products and survival equipment on social media, and the one thing I have found is they always represent them by soliciting fear. Russia can't fart without an announcement of something terrible coming our way. China can't blink without an announcement of some catastrophe happening. The mere fact that not many of us are survivalist trained, or super able-bodied people leads me to ask these questions. Why would anyone that can't survive a social disturbance think they would survive a calamity-driven event by purchasing tens of thousands of dollars in freeze-dried prepper food? Or survival equipment they physically could never use? There is always an asteroid on its way to Earth. There is always a virus lurking out there ready to infect us. And there will always be an end to everything. So in conclusion to this video, my message would be, preparedness is always a good idea in moderation and affordability, so yes, buy a few extra tins here and there when you can. But don't let life pass you by worrying about an event that may or may not happen. Just enjoy the moments we cherish, for time is a thief in the night, never to return. And we have a limited time on this planet, so enjoy the things that mean the most to you. Look around at the people you see every day. Try and make one small positive impact in your world, and you will quickly find that the end is simply the beginning of something new. Thank you very much for watching. And don't forget to subscribe and smash the like button, it helps the channel out a lot. It would be great to see your opinions in the comments as well. And as always, stay blessed and may the force be with you.